Hi there. This is Holly from Holly's Pandorium, and I've got my friend with me tonight. Hi, Jay. How are you?
Good evening, everybody.
We're glad to be back, and we've got an interesting group of things to talk about tonight. So, we've talked a lot about ghosts, we've talked a lot about Bigfoot, we've talked a lot about Dogman, and just people's stories, which have been wonderful. But there's a subject that we haven't really delved into a lot. And so part of my goal, as you all know, is I want to encourage conversations about the paranormal. And this is one of those conversations that's still so woo-woo. There are people that just don't even want to talk about it. It's a complete joke. It's just a legend. It's not real. But I personally know people in the last 3 years that have seen two of these things that we're going to talk about in real time. Like during a barbecue outside, broad daylight, multiple people witnessing the same thing. So I don't know what to do with that. Take with that what you will. Reliable sources, people I trust and believe in. And so I'm amazed, but here we go. So we're going to talk about leprechauns and fairies tonight.
Okay, leprechauns
Yeah.
and fairies.
Okay.
All
So
right,
first
roll
of
up my
all,
sleeves and get ready here.
right. Okay. So I'm going to throw a picture out here. So the typical leprechaun that everybody thinks about is, cheerful, and everybody's seen them on cereal boxes, and there's all these stories and legends. But what's really fascinating that you might not know is in Ireland, they've actually been acknowledged. There's a gentleman by the name of P.J. O'Hare that discovered bones in a suit, and the suit was dated to be 1,500 years old. And this is in an area called Slate Rock in Ireland. And he told his friend, Kevin Woods, hey, I found these bones and I found these clothes. And Kevin said, you're full of crap. I don't believe you. And PJ ended up passing away a few years later. And Kevin was walking outside and actually went to the area where PJ said he saw them. And he saw not one, but 3 leprechauns. And they actually spoke to him. And they told him they only wanted one thing from him. Would he please ask more people to believe in leprechauns? And he said, I can work on that. And so since that time, kept going backwards a little bit, Kevin challenged PJ with the story and said, I've lived here my whole life. I've never seen a leprechaun. I think you're full of beans. And he actually challenged PJ, and he started this community hunt. And so he had 4,000 people come out just to hunt for leprechauns. They found nothing. He made it an adventure hunt, and he left money and stuffed leprechauns out for people to find just for the fun of it. All in good spirit, nothing goofy about it. But after PJ died, Kevin continued doing this hunt, and he still does to this day, because after his personal encounter, he said he couldn't deny it. And so he's now known as the Leprechaun Whisperer in Ireland. And he actually petitioned their legislation in Ireland. And I'm going to show that image again, or another image. It's the European Habitats Directive. And this is to protect wildlife and plants, flora and fauna, because they could not prove nor deny the actual existence of leprechauns. They finally got, after 7 years of fighting, they got the legislation in Ireland to acknowledge leprechauns and put them on an endangered list, which here in America, we bucket snort about endangered owls and things like that. So can you imagine? So there's people in Ireland that swear they've seen them. There are bones and clothes. The clothes have been dated, and the stories about leprechauns still are considered legend for the most part. But what's fascinating about them is some of the details I find incredible. And one of them is that there are no female leprechauns, only male, and that the only way they reproduce is with female fairies. And part of the way that they make that happen is they dance constantly. They dance and dance and dance and dance. And this part of this imagery I'm showing has something else to do with a legend to do with fairies, which has to do with fairy circles, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But what's incredible is that supposedly they all make shoes, And it's because they dance so much that they have to make shoes because they're constantly wearing them out. And they wear two different types of shoes, one for walking about and the other one just for dancing with fairies so that they can reproduce.
Well, that doesn't surprise me. Are
What's
you
that?
are you familiar with a 1960s Disney movie called Darby O'Gill and the Little People?
Yes, yes, I actually have seen that.
Yes, I remember seeing that at a drive-in when I was a little kid.
Okay.
But yeah, it takes it's a spin on that legend about only being male, the leprechauns, dancing,
Right.
the whole pot of gold thing. And what you're talking about there is in Ireland and Celtic lore. The name fairy actually comes from fae, the
Mm-hmm.
fae lore, and
Right.
that's where fairies come from. And when you're talking about fairies, again, kind of Disney ruined it for everybody because they think of Tinkerbell or something, with this Little Mermaid type character with dragonfly wings or whatever.
Right.
Um, but actually, Fae lore covers a multitude. Wood sprites, leprechauns. The list goes on and on of fairies.
Mm-hmm.
They're just kind of lumped into a category of fairies. But if you do some investigation of Fey lore, there's a whole laundry list of different types of fairies, and leprechauns are part of them. And over in Ireland, they have fairy mounds, and they
Yes.
have fairy circles, and that is big, big medicine over there. You do not mess with a fairy mound, and you do not mess with fairy circles over there. Otherwise, doom and destruction be upon your head.
Right.
Just a little piece of trivia: John DeLorean, the maker of the DeLorean car,
Mm-hmm.
had his factory built over in Ireland, and he was warned not to put his factory there because there was a fairy circle, and he completely disregarded, mowed it over,
Wow.
and built his factory. And we all know what happened to John DeLorean and his factory and his car.
Right.
They were all came tumbling down.
Right.
And over there in Ireland, they were like, "Yeah, see, we told you."
And
Um,
what's fascinating is, so I'm going to show a couple images of fairy circles. So fairy circles are made up of a circle of mushrooms, or they can be flowers. And this image that I'm showing right here is a fairy circle, and the depiction is to try and keep people out of it. Fairy circles were considered to be sacred, and the lore for them is very genuine and sincere, and that you're supposed to, like Jay said, stay out of the way. Stay out of them. Don't go near them. They're sacred. And part of that I find fascinating is the story about just fairies in general. Fairies actually, like Jay was saying, fairies have different types. There's lots of different types of fairies. There's fairies that show up during what's supposed to be the first half of the year, which are, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, I'm just going to give basics. So if somebody wants to talk about more specifics, I can always delve into it more later. But there's so much about fairies that's fascinating. And so the first half of the year, the spring and summer, is supposed to be the good fairies. And these are fairies that are known to help humans with problems. They can actually ask for favors. There's a lot of fairy lore that will suggest that they have limited clothing. And so if you want to honor a fairy or ask for a favor from a fairy, you're supposed to provide them with clothing in the form of some type of material that's a natural organic, like linen or silk or cotton. And you're supposed to make sure that it's earth color. So it can only be things that you would see in nature. It can only be browns or beiges or pale greens and things like that, things that are more natural looking. The other thing about fairies that I find really amazing is that there's a lot of legend information that they're actually aliens that came from another planet and another dimension, and that they're royalty, and that they tolerate us, basically. And so when we come upon them, we're supposed to be incredibly polite and respectful. And if you watch, there's a movie called True Blood that was on HBO years ago, or not, I shouldn't say movie, a series. And they delve into this fairy legend just a little bit and talk about people mixing with fairies and what happens to them. And fae is a terminology that's used quite a bit in that. And it's very fascinating. They actually delve into the hierarchy of fairy, fairy royalty and how they came about to being here. And it's something to the effect of them not being able to live in the world they were in, so they had to come here. And this was a livable place. And that they, like Bigfoot, have been kind of staying out of our way and avoiding us to have their own spot on the earth. And I want to show this other image really quick here too. So this is another depiction of a fairy circle, and this is where someone has permission to be in the fairy circle, and you can see the fairies dancing around this guy who's playing music, or he's holding a lyre of some kind, or lute. He has their permission to be there, and this is something that's considered a great honor. There's another type of fairy that is in the rest of the year that's typically known to be out in the open in fall and winter, and they are more mischievous. They've been known to steal human children, and with the idea that they're saving them from humans, that they believe they can give them a better life, and they take them. There's also
that might have a little bit of a crossover with the foundling.
Oh yes,
legends.
Yeah. Talk about that for a minute, Jay.
Well, foundlings are basically where you have one of these fairies who, like you mentioned, would steal babies,
right?
But they would return essentially a clone.
Correct.
So that they would steal the natural baby and return an imposter.
Right.
And typically, the foundlings, wouldn't last that long. And that kind of goes into another part of the fae lore in these fairies.
Right.
Is that when you encounter them, a lot of times the legends will say that if they offer you a gift, like say the leprechauns and a pot of gold, that if you accept that gift, you are trapped within their dimension. You will not be able to leave and come back to your normal life if you accept the gift. But if you refuse the gift, and when they leave, the gift transmutates into dust, bark, leaves, something natural, but it you don't get to keep whatever the gift was, and you would be surprised at how far this descriptions of these fairies and their attributes goes all over the world.
Yes.
I heard of a legend from some Alaskan Native Americans who were talking about, one of these fairies that they have up there, or Bigfoot or whatever, offering salmon. And if you accepted the salmon, you were not allowed to leave their realm. But once they left, if you hadn't accepted it, that salmon would turn into tree bark. So you weren't able to, even keep the salmon.
Right.
And so these legends are far and wide. And when you remove those names of whatever you want to give them, fairies or leprechauns or Bigfoot, but when you just look at their attributes and the legends, they all kind of, meld together. It's amazing.
Right. So even in Roman and Greek times, there were supposedly leprechauns that used to run around naked or almost naked. And they were considered to be leprechauns at the time. And they were considered small men or smaller men. They were streakers in Roman times. And I'm not sure where they originated from. There's legends about people that were actually transported from one area to another and became little people in that area, like the people in Hawaii. There's legends of small people all over the world, literally in every culture. So it makes me wonder if they're supposedly everywhere. And we're talking about, people that are 12 to 18 inches tall.
Yeah,
So they were small. Right.
that's like
So we
Barbie
know,
and G.I. Joe size,
correct. So we know from going to Europe and looking at castle and armor and whatnot that our ancestors were a bit smaller than we were. They had different carbohydrates than we do now. And so a 4 foot or 5 foot adult was not uncommon several hundred years ago. But someone that's 2 feet tall, that's still considered small by those standards. And so having somebody that's 12 to 14 inches tall is still going to be considered a small person no matter what. So whether they became pygmies, whether they originated as pygmies, there's a lot of discussion when you talk about all of these legends as to where they originated, where they came from. And Jay's right, the names for them are completely crossed over in different languages, and they always lead back to something along the lines, or in most cases, I shouldn't say always, in most cases, they lead back to things that have to do with their size. In some cases, it has to do with royalty. In other cases, it has to do with location. But they sound similar to leprechaun, and they kind of bring it to that level where, okay, well, we're not sure where you started, but here we are now. We know them as leprechauns. We know that they have either red or green clothing. They have 2 different kinds of shoes. They make shoes. They're cobblers. But they constantly dance. They only breed with fairies. There's so much of the stories about them. And I think it's amazing that, like I said, I want to show this again because I still think this is incredible. They're in Ireland, clearly being seen by people on a regular basis, and there's still denial. There's still people saying, no way, no way, no way. Well, can you deny it all the time? Can you just say at least it's a legend? Is everybody full of beans? I mean, we talk about, I'm going to show this image. This is an image from another story that we had with Al Santoriga. And this was a depiction of something that he saw when he was 13 years old. That looks incredible. But we now have a lot of belief and a lot of people following Bigfoot stories and seeking out Bigfoot. And then, of course, then there's ghost stuff. I mean, we have a lot of ghost hunting and a lot of research. Why is it so impossible to think that fairies are completely nonsense? And why are leprechauns completely nonsense? Maybe they're not. Maybe there's something to them. Maybe there is something that we can consider about them. The stories about them are so amazing, and they blow me away. They go by dwarf, sprite, all kinds of other names. But what are they doing? Why are they doing it? Why did this leprechaun whisperer get asked to ask more people to believe? What does that even mean? Why would they want us to believe in them? Does it have something to do with their energy? Do they need belief?
I don't know. Those are questions for the books. But just recently, you brought up Bigfoot.
Mm-hmm.
Bigfoot may be one of these fairies because, like I say, when you strip away the name and you strip away the preconceived notions, and you just look at the characteristics, fairies, they're physical, they interact with people, they're seen,
Right.
they can manipulate the physical things around you, unlike like a lot of ghosts, but they seem to be able to, they can throw rocks, they can shake trees, they can, do all these things in the physical world, but they seem to disappear into the thin air.
Right.
And that's very fairy-like. Fairies disappear without a trace. Are they interdimensional? Do they come through portals? That type of thing. I mean, there's been reports of Bigfoots where people are tracking very, very clear Bigfoot trails, and leaving very, very clear marks. And then all of a sudden they disappear into thin air.
Right.
And it's like, well, why do the tracks stop and, they just disappear?
Right.
So there's been a reports of, people shooting them and having no effect at all.
Right.
So there's supernatural beings, maybe. There's, the whole alien thing.
Right.
There's been, one claim I heard was as a guy actually shot one. It went down. He went over and confirmed the kill, went to go grab somebody to prove that he shot a Bigfoot, came
Right.
back, and there was nothing there. So like I was saying, they kind of disappear into the ether. Yeah, so when you take away the name and the preconceived notions, you come back to these fairy, characteristics. Yes, it's 8 feet tall, hairy one, and not one of the little bitty ones. There's my camera. The little
Right.
bitty ones.
Right.
But with the characteristics, I don't know. It may fall into that fey lore type of thing. Willows of the Wisp. That cartoon movie Brave.
Oh yeah.
With the wisp willows. That type of thing, and they're drawing them into the woods. They're drawing them in. For what
Right.
purpose? I don't know. But again, if they offer you a gift and you accept, people disappear.
Right.
The national parks here in California, if you look at the disappearances within the forests of California and Oregon, where people, disappear into thin air, kind of makes you wonder. You go, once you talking about these fairy lores and stuff,
Right.
are these people that, encountered one of these supernatural beings and accepted one of the gifts and disappeared into another dimension? I don't know. There's a lot to think about.
Right. And talking about gifts, there's legends that talk about, because they are royalty, if you actually were to bring gifts to the king and queen of the fairies, you would be given good luck and you would be blessed by them.
Mm-hmm.
Pixies are one of the names of another name for fairies, and they have so many different levels of fairies. Like there's fairies that we just think are all one group, and there's a bunch. So there's something called a Spriggans, which is more powerful than a normal fairy. And there's the pixies. They're often naked. You can give them clothing. They love horses. They give great blessings to humans that honor the earth.
Let me stop you there. Have you ever heard of a fairy knot?
I don't know why. I think I have, but tell me what you know about it, because nothing's
fairy knots are braids that are unexplainably put into horses' manes.
Yes, and actually, I've heard of women actually getting them in their hair periodically.
Yeah, and the part of the legend is that the fairies braid the horses' manes because there's a connection between horses and fairies.
That makes sense.
And so, wild horses or whatever, they get these braids in their mane, and they're called fairy braids.
Right. That's amazing.
Yeah.
In talking about, let's go back to the fairy rings for another minute. Typically, fairy rings occur in a grassy area. Mm-hmm. I know of people that have found them in their backyards. I know of people that have documented them, and I found several pictures. And you can Google this, please. If you're interested in this subject, I challenge you to Google a little bit of this. There's lots of imagery from actual photographs of people finding fairy circles, sometimes made out of mushrooms, like I said, sometimes made out of flowers, but they're supposed to be incredibly dangerous, but it's a blessing if it's near your home. It means that you've been accepted by the fairy community.
Sometimes they're made out of rocks.
Okay.
Yeah. Also, while you're Googling, Google fairy mounds.
Okay, yeah.
You'll see a bunch of like mounds with, like standing trees and things.
Right.
And they'll be in like, farmers' fields and stuff. And the farmers have great respect for them because they will, plant their wheat or sunflowers or whatever around these mounds, and they will not desecrate those fairy mounds at all. But while you're Googling, check out some Google images of fairy mounds.
Yeah, even in the Philippines, there's legends about fairy circles, and they consider them completely sacred. They won't ever disturb them. Now, here's the interesting part. So you find a fairy circle. What is it? Well, the legends say that they are portals to the fairies' dimension. And so the difficulty in is twofold. If you break the circle, you can be cursed because of breaking it. But the other problem with them for humans and animals and wildlife is that if you step into the circle, you can actually be taken to the dimension and not return home. So it's all legend, it's all hearsay until somebody loses a car company, like Mr. John DeLorean. I mean,
or you disappear in a national forest.
Right. Right. And because, again, this is a legend. This is something that not everybody talks about. And it's not a story that most kids hear much about in the States, about legends to do with these sort of things. But I find it interesting, too, because in the fairy family, there's things called pixies and even banshees are considered to be part of the fairy group.
Exactly. That's part of the fae lore.
Right. And so banshees are considered to be intoxicating to listen to, but they draw people to their death. And they typically are associated with things near the ocean, which is really interesting because there's also
goes along the lines of like the sirens from Ulysses.
Correct.
The siren song, that is draws them toward the rocks for their destruction.
Right.
But they're so intoxicating that they can't turn away,
Right. So pixies, by contrast, are more known to be on Earth land area. They tend to be childlike, and they're small like a child, but even smaller in times. They tend to travel in large groups. They are the ones that tend to kidnap children, and allegedly they kidnap children to save them, like some of the naughtier pixies or other fairies do. But they also supposedly do this. They are enchanted with human children because they love their innocence and supposedly want to save them from human adult behavior, is the theory, or what I've heard anyway.
Okay.
But they also can bless you. They can actually bless you quite a bit, and they tend to punish humans that they think are doing something that goes against the earth. So again, that goes back to the same thing with John DeLorean. Because he destroyed something in nature, not just that it was a circle, but because he did some destruction to an area that they considered sacred, that would be a reason for him to be cursed and have a problem with his car company, which, again, this is theory and legend we're talking about. It's,
Well, yes, but over in Ireland, they take it very seriously over there. Just like the signs that you showed,
right?
Because they cannot be confirmed and because they cannot be denied,
Correct.
And because they're part of supposedly the natural world, right. They're taking the better cautious than not, position to say, look, whether they're real or whether they're not, we need to protect them.
Exactly.
That's their attitude over there, because they do take that seriously, even though they can't, confirm or deny, to the scientific method.
Right. But for people that have seen them, and from, again, I'm going to go back to the stories that I've heard in recent years, and this is several different people. In one instance, I know someone that's a health practitioner, and they were doing some Reiki meditations and were doing energy healing with the patient. And over time, on a regular basis, this fairy was showing up in her yard, and then she had Bigfoot showing up in her Reiki sessions. And so I've heard from several Bigfoot hunters that they go hand in hand. And so what I mean by that is they will see these, what looks like a sprite or some kind of twinkling light, and then they find Bigfoot not far behind.
Right.
Like almost a precursor to say Bigfoot's in the area. So there's a lot of people I know that are Bigfoot researchers and hunters that genuinely believe that fairies are connected to Bigfoot, that they're somehow dimensionally connected, and that somehow they work in conjunction with each other. And that makes sense to me. If the legend is true, if there's any basis in reality in the legend of fairies, if they are from another dimension, what if, like you said, what if Bigfoot's part of that? Maybe that's why they can hide. Maybe why that we've never caught them is because we can't, because they're not going to be caught, because they have skills that we don't even understand.
Right.
Because that makes a lot of sense to me. And I think from a human perspective, everything we have that we understand is we can see and touch and hear and smell, and it's right in front of us. It's very tangible. The idea that something is easily hidden or can disappear or cloak itself in
That
some
becomes
way.
magic. Anything that you can't explain with your modern technology or scientific method
Right,
is becomes magic. I mean,
right,
that's just the box that it ends up in.
right. And so if you're outside at a barbecue and you see something fly past you and you look at it 2 and then 3 times and it's got wings and it's the size of a Barbie doll, what is that?
Right.
Well,
Well, you go to what you know and you say,
right,
that's a
right.
fairy.
So if you're not intoxicated, it's broad daylight, and you're seeing things that you can't explain, who do you tell about that? And how do you discuss that? And there are people that are open-minded that'll say, well, you saw a fairy or you saw a sprite, or there are parts of the South, is what I've been told. Tennessee, South Carolina, different states. I can't even remember all of them. I've heard from several different people that it is a common sight. People don't talk about it much, but it's understood that when you live near the wooded area, um, you're going to see them, and you don't disturb them. You don't, if you find a tree with certain indications on it, and I wish I could remember all the details, but I don't right at the moment. But there's certain ways that people have learned to educate themselves, and they share with their local friends. Don't disturb this tree if there's this thing on it, or this type of growth, or the circles, or whatever it is. You leave them alone. You don't disturb them, and then you're okay. And you can tell people that have had problems because they didn't respect and they didn't acknowledge and they didn't follow along. And apparently, if you're pissing them off, they actually dive bomb you, like in the movie Birds, where people were getting, seagulls or whatever those other birds were that were flying at people. Apparently, they kind of do that. The ones that are more aggressive will actually come after you and yell at you. I have a friend who does a lot of hiking in the woods in Washington and Oregon. And he's told me a story last year about, having his headphones in and listening to music. And he's always very careful and quiet. And there's certain trees that are considered sacred in our area by Native American cultures. And so he's very respectful where he goes, how he steps, where he walks. He's very gentle. And he was going around this tree and he went to put his right foot down and it came back up like he hit a springboard.
Aha, he's stepping on it.
And he heard yelling and he went, whoa, like he looked down, pulled out his headphone, and there was a fairy screaming at him and vulgarly cussing him out and telling him he was beep, 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 you almost stepped on me, you jerk, and so many other words. And I thought, okay. And he, because I'm open to those things, people tend to share these other stories with me. Well, if all these adults that have common sense, that are not intoxicated during daylight hours, are seeing these creatures, I feel like it's okay to keep bringing it up and talking to people, because I know there's more stories out there. So what I'm going to encourage people is talk about this. What do you think about what we're saying tonight? And
well, yeah, and if something like that happens, who are you going to tell it to that's not going to think that you're crazy or making it up and lying?
Right.
I mean, those are the two boxes, because how do you come to terms with that when it happens to you?
Right.
You just go, well, who can I tell without them throwing a net over me and putting me in the funny farm?
Well, and then the
especially if you have a sensitive job. I mean, I worked as a federal police officer for a long time and had a Q clearance and had to, maintain that.
Right.
And if I had been, blabbing that around, they'd have pulled my clearance and said, hey, this guy's, got a screw loose. We better take his gun from him and put him in the corner because he ain't normal,
Right.
So who are you going to tell,
Right. Well, and I think we know that the human mind can only handle so many things, and that when we see something that's out of our spectrum of understanding, that our brain fills in the blanks.
Right.
So there's that. That's something we understand from science. But
Right.
repeated viewings, repeated interactions, local interactions, whether it's with a Bigfoot or with some type of a fairy, what is that? Why is that happening? Should we be afraid of them? I don't think so. I think they've been living along this planet a lot longer than we have, from what I can tell. And the stories, you guys, the stories for these things are so vast. And I mean to tell you that they're everywhere. They're in every culture, on every continent. There's either little people and or fairies. And some of them are kind, some of them are not. There's lots of cautionary tales about interactions with them. But if you believe the idea that it's possible, I want you to be prepared. If you come across something like this, consider the possibility. What if they are from another dimension? What if they are royalty? We need to not treat them like bugs. We need to be conscious that they're another living entity, and let's be kind and let's study them. Let's be open to the conversation, at least. If you feel like you've seen something along the lines of what we're talking about, please contact me if you want to share it, or if you want me to just share your story. If you don't want to be on public display talking about it because you're not comfortable, I totally understand. But I want you to know, I'll believe you. I will listen to you and I will believe you, because the paranormal conversation for me is what it's all about. I think we're very fortunate that we're not the only ones here. I feel like we've lost our sense of wonder and magic as we become adults. And I believe that I've been very blessed because I've gotten to see ghosts. I've gotten to see UFOs when I was a kid. Have not seen aliens up close that I know of. I've seen Bigfoots and all of these other things in line. And I know that I saw a fairy once. And I really had a hard time with that, which was funny because I was more accepting of the Bigfoot that I didn't even know what it was until later. The fairy really blew me away because that to me kind of shattered my reality a little bit, because that was so close to wonder and magic and Disney.
Right.
That I kind of went, do I believe this? My eyes saw it. I saw it with my eyes, and it was warning me. And what was fascinating about this is, remember when there were some really bad fires not too long ago, a couple of years ago? There were some bad
Of course.
fires.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, for anyone that doesn't know me very well, I have lung conditions that are pretty significant. And so in the summer, I typically like to leave my window open when I sleep, as do a lot of people. And I heard a voice telling me, close the window. It woke me up. And I thought, is it Doug? No. Doug's sound asleep, so it's not Doug. So I peek out the window, and there's this fairy. And it repeats, close the window. And it was with a sense of sincerity and urgency that I thought, I'm not sure why you're telling me this, but I'm going to trust and know that it's probably for a good reason. So I shut the window and I just fell right back to sleep. And I didn't really dwell on it or think about it. I just conked out. Was I in shock a little bit? I think so. And I was exhausted. And so I kind of wondered, what was that? And then the next day, there was these air quality warnings that were huge. I couldn't go outside for 3 days. Right. Because the air quality was so bad. And so, do I feel like a fairy warned me to protect me? Yes. And I'm incredibly grateful, because had I slept with my window open all night, I likely would have been in the hospital, because it would have taken so much out of my breathing.
Or you would have had such a lack of oxygen you passed out and died. One of the two.
Right. So I believe that they helped me genuinely.
So here's another thought that just crossed my mind. What if it was a spirit that took the form of a fairy in order to deliver the message, so that you would know that it was sure. real and not just a dream or a random thought or your subconscious, but it was an actual spirit that took the form of a fairy to get your attention, so that you would pay attention and because you're groggy from your sleep or whatever.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
but there's a fairy, and it's like, oh, what the hell?
Right.
And then that way it got your attention, and she delivered a serious message. Close
Right.
the window.
Right.
And you go, oh, okay,
Well, and that's the thing too. It's like, I don't know how everybody sleeps, but I sleep pretty heavy. When I'm asleep, it's like I'm a log. I'm out. And so my kids, when I was raising children years ago, would have to come up and peel my eyelids open and go, Mom, are you awake? Mom. Because I would work myself to being, so you're laying in bed, you're sound asleep, and suddenly your eyeballs opened. It's like, okay, I'm awake.
yeah.
But I sleep hard. I always have. I sleep very hard. So yeah, I mean, whatever it was that gave me the message, yay. I mean, because they helped me genuinely. But it made me wonder, because of all the other stories I've heard from other people, what the heck? Are they that close to us? Are they, it made me wonder a lot of things. But I started studying, and it's like, even in the Scottish stories, so there's Seelies and Bogarts or hobgoblins. And
yes, I've heard of, being of Scottish descent, I've heard of Bogarts, yeah.
Right.
And I'm not talking, Bogart and a joint, my friend, but yeah, Bogart's the Fey, right? The Fey Lords. Yeah.
So if anyone has seen the movie Legend, and you understand what brownies are, you've seen them in the movie. Okay.
Brownies and Bogarts, yep.
So they actually have all this information and history about this. So brownies work for food, love cake and cream, and have bad tempers, totally like what's in the movies.
Yes.
Hobgoblins or Bogarts follow families. And if you think of Harry Potter.
Yeah, there's the Bogart, yeah.
Okay.
From Harry Potter, right.
And they're the ones that come out in fall and winter, and salt repels them, which I found very curious. So now the Seelies in court, they help humans. They're beautiful. They seek favors, and they are the ones that come out in spring and summer. They're considered to be small and human-like, and the views of people that have seen them during the day in the daylight, that is the description I've had every single time.
Right.
So I don't go around sharing these stories with people. This is the first time I've done this in a big public manner. So when I'm telling you this, it's because I want you to understand, for anyone listening or watching, people will talk to me about everything else, the weather, family, job, blah, 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 whatever's going on. And eventually, sometimes a paranormal thing will come up in conversation, and we wind up talking about fairies or something like that. And when I've heard these stories from people that have been fairy experiencers or leprechaun experiencers, they are human-like in every case. They don't have wings necessarily. They're small people, is what I've been told. But they do fly, they do hover. So I get why, just like in angel depictions, there's always wings. In the Roman and Greek time, angels were depicted as having little feathers on their heads or on their feet, and that was to represent them being able to move in the air. Over time, the angels that we associate with have like swan-sized wings. They're massive, symbolizing their ability to move in the air and do things that are like a bird. But
the other thing that you'll find with a lot of this Fey lore is, luminescence.
Yes.
They'll be bright.
Yes.
They'll be lit.
Right.
And that's where you have like your wisps and your fairies and things like that, where they'll be illuminated, or that shows that they're godlike, I guess, would be the thing, or an angel-like, because of the self-luminescence. So that's a trait for a lot of the Fae,
right?
Fairies. And maybe they show wings, maybe they don't. Maybe they're amorphous. Maybe they're just a ball of light. But that's another trait that they'll display is self-luminescence.
Right. Now, the one that I saw was at night, and it was really bright. And I didn't see a whole lot of features. Again, I was woken up suddenly to someone talking to me, telling me to shut my window. So I was more focusing on the sound. And when I finally sat up, I saw it outside my window, and it was not close to my window. It was a good 10 feet away, and it wasn't very big. It was smaller, and it was super bright. And what I thought I saw was like a flashlight, and I thought, someone's outside in my yard. And I try to rub your eyes and kind of try and wake up enough to see what you're looking at. And I'm watching this and going, what? And again, close your window. And I could see what looked like something moving. I could see like arms moving. It was not able at the time. I was not able to discern facial features or anything like that. But there was a lot of light. There was something wiggling and moving, and the voice repeated, and the phrase was repeated. So that's the only reason why I say fairy, because, yeah, maybe it was a ghost. Maybe that showed up like that. I don't know. I genuinely don't know. I don't know. Whatever it was, I'm grateful for it. And I really hope that people are open to seeing them. I know children are supposedly more able to see them than we are, because they aren't burdened by the no factor of that can't be real, so that can't exist. So I will block that out of my sight because it can't be real.
Well, and they also require more protection than adults.
Yeah.
I've may have or may have not told of my experience when I was a child of falling out of the tree and being snatched back onto the branch of the tree.
Right.
By a unknown force.
Correct.
I don't know, by my definition, I call it a guardian angel, because
right.
I have no other box to dip into based upon, my knowledge of what's going on.
Right.
But the fact remains that there was some type of, intervention, whether it be spiritual or, paranormal. I don't know. All I know is that something beyond my control brought me from falling off of a limb upright and saved my life as a young child.
Right.
I don't know how to explain it, and I don't know how to define it anything other than, a guardian angel, because that's the stories that I know.
Right.
Same thing with my Bigfoot experience.
Right.
Did I see a Bigfoot? No. But once my logical mind goes through the Rolodex of all the things that it could be,
right,
and it doesn't fit, that's what I'm kind of left with.
So as we were discussing the different parts of fairy life and things to do with fairies, the fairy folk, if you watch the specials on PBS and some of that, they'll talk about, and I know I'm going to slaughter this, so forgive me for people that can speak this more clearly. Tuatha De Danann, a form of otherworldly royalty, fae folk.
That's pretty close. It's Tuatha De Danann. Yeah.
Okay. There's
pretty
an
close.
Emily Zarka that did a PBS special, and she discussed the royal fairy warrior gods as being shapeshifters. So the reason why I'm mentioning this is because that kind of feeds into me the Bigfoot notion of them being connected, and maybe they are one and the same.
Exactly. Once you strip away the names and look at the characteristics, they're very similar.
Maybe. I mean, but it's fascinating to me, because if they have hierarchy, why wouldn't they have, in another dimension, vastly different sizes? Why wouldn't they have vastly different jobs and responsibilities? There's been discussion among Bigfooters about who's helping who. Are the fairies helping the Bigfoot? Is the Bigfoot helping the fairy? Are they working in conjunction? I have people that have told me that are Bigfoot hunters, dogmen hunters, and so on, that they have noticed that Bigfoot seem to look out for humans and actually protect them from dogmen.
Oh, okay.
What I've been told is that people will see lights, like a fairy showing up at night, and then suddenly there's a Bigfoot, and they tend to make noise, throw rocks, and move the humans out of an area, and that they end up catching up on their webcams or their other recording devices the images of a dog man or what appears to be a dog man at some other point. And so they all seem to be connected and working around each other at some level. So
Gotcha.
it makes sense to me. If something's from another dimension, all bets are off. We don't know what they're capable of. We don't know their technologies. We don't know their limitations or unlimitations. What are they able to do? What can't they do? We have no idea. What are they benefiting from the earth? Are they living in harmony with nature? What do they eat? When do they sleep? I mean, there's lots of questions I have about all this, but it seems that they do a lot of good more than not. I'm going to show another image here of the fairy, and what I want to do is just, for people that are listening, I'm showing a picture that's a depiction from the late 1800s. Fairies have been so entrenched in European culture that they are accepted as legend. And there's many, many stories about people interacting with fairies and having experiences. And because of technology, we've had imagery and things that we can share. Now, there was a period of time where people faked, like the picture I'm showing right now. There were dolls made, and there was a family that the dad was a photographer and the daughter took all these posed images with fairies supposedly from their property. Originally, it was believed, people were very entrenched in it and said, oh, this is awesome, and they made quite a bit of money. And then it was debunked at some point later, and it was all staged and faked. So yes, I know that there's a lot of hoo-ha about fairies being just legend and people making stuff up. And I genuinely didn't have a whole lot of belief in fairies myself up until a few years ago. I always thought of them as legend. I loved them. I loved seeing images of them, whether they were scary or beautiful, it didn't matter. I think they're amazing, especially the wings that resemble butterflies, because that was my mom's favorite thing on the planet. And so, of course, I was attracted to that. But the legends and stories about them, to me, are great stories, because there's talk about interacting with humans in a way that's really positive for the most part. Cautionary tales about greed, the whole leprechaun thing about them being able to hide their wealth from us. And if you capture one, supposedly you can get their wealth. But as Jay was saying, it disappears. It's fleeting. It never stays. But the pursuit of the greed is interesting, because that's universal. That's been around for millennium. There's always been people seeking wealth and other things and favors. Why do we have fairies? What are they for? When have you seen them? When have you not seen them? Do you think they're just an old legend that people have been tossing around? Do they have some weight? With all of the different cultures that have stories about fairies and little people or leprechauns, I think there's something to it. They say
well,
that
there has to be, for it to be able to, last this long, and
right,
to be so universal amongst every culture around the world.
right,
In cultures that you would like you were saying about the Polynesians, or like
right,
I was saying, Alaskan, Native Americans. It's not just that European, British Isles type thing, but it's pervasive all over and everywhere.
mm-hmm,
Um, these things. Japan. Asia.
right,
There's got to be something to it for everybody to have stories that just overlap so much.
right,
No matter what the name is that you call
right,
it,
right.
but when you look at the characteristics, there's got to be something to it, right?
Well, and I think it's interesting too that the leprechauns with their outfits are so synonymous with Ireland and being Irish. There's festivals all over the world. I just saw images today for people celebrating St. Patrick's Day and all dressing in green and having the green top hats, and that's all synonymous with honoring Ireland and the Irish beliefs about such things. But genuinely, there's so many similarities in the stories and legends and guidelines about what not to do around them, what they are capable of, and why they exist, or what their purpose is in our lives. In all cultures of having little people, not just that look like leprechauns, but they're just, the 12 to 18 inches high. Don't mess with them, don't capture them, don't ask them for favors, basically leave them alone.
Right.
But I find it fascinating that in Ireland that there is a regard for them at such a level, and that the Leprechaun Whisperer is still doing tours. He has a little museum set up to kind of encourage people to think about them being real and experiencing that. And I highly recommend you, if any of you have gone to Ireland, to seek this guy out. You can find it on different things on YouTube. And if you have trouble finding it, just send me a message. I'll help you find it. I think it's amazing, and I love that the whole idea is so coming out again. It feels like this is one of those amazing legends that we've all heard something about it, but I love that there's more stories coming out in the public now, and I love that I'm hearing these other stories. So I'd love to hear more. So if any of you have a story like this, or you know of someone that has a story, even if it's an old one, I would love to hear it. I would love to hear more about it, and I'd love to hear details. I love to hear people's questions and comments. If you like what you're listening to and watching, please give us a like on Facebook or on YouTube. It all helps. And it's a free way to help support the channel. I'd appreciate it very much. Is there any closing thoughts you have tonight, Jay, for this subject matter?
Well, when you think about it, what did you know about, Bigfoot or UFOs or ghost hunting or something let's just say 15 years ago, right? Not a whole lot, right?
Right.
I mean, that
Right.
was what is it that you say, the woo 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 stuff?
Right.
Nobody took any of it seriously at all.
Right.
30 years ago, I worked with a fella who was telling me of his experience about the UFO incident at Bentwaters in England.
Oh, wow.
He was stationed there, and that's when it first came to my attention, was hearing his story and his experience of the UFO at Bentwaters Air Force Base in England. And now that's a famous incident. But 30 years ago, I had never heard of it. So these things are starting to come to light, and the more and more they're talked about, the more and more other people are coming forward. So Bigfoot, okay, everybody's heard of Bigfoot by now. UFOs, everybody's heard about UFOs now.
Right.
Ghost hunting, everybody's seen the TV shows and know what ghost hunting's about.
Right.
Well, this is just something that hasn't been talked about a lot.
Right.
But everybody has that kind of limited Disney kind of perspective of Tinkerbell and Will-o'-the-Wisps and the little kind of children's story type things.
Yeah, exactly.
But when you delve into actually investigating the Fae lore, and you learn about the different fairies and the different locales, it's a deep rabbit hole for you to go down and learn that this is not new, and it's been around for thousands of years. And so for it to be that pervasive for that long, got to be something to it. So I'm just saying to everybody, keep an open mind. The chances of any of us, stepping on a leprechaun or a fairy are probably very small.
Right.
But keep an open mind, and don't soil your depends if you do end up having it. Enjoy the experience and take it in. That's kind of my advice.
Enjoy the ride.
Enjoy the ride. Sit back, enjoy the ride, and think about it later. Digest it later. Just kind of take everything in and digest it later. Then you can sit down and think about, okay, let's try to define it.
Right.
In whatever way that you can, based upon your experiences. But don't freak out.
Well, and like I always say, most people don't believe in the paranormal until it's in their face.
Exactly.
We don't believe until we see things, and I totally understand that because I'm one of
those. I'm one of those guys that it's like, okay, well, maybe not, but until I experience it, I don't know.
Right.
But
It's not
having
tangible.
had these experiences that I've had along the way, I go, okay, well, yeah, I had something like that happen to me, so I have empathy for you because I experienced the same thing. But
Right.
I'm one of those guys that where it's like I'll keep an open mind until it happens to me, and then okay, I'll boil the fat off it later.
Right. Well, and I myself, I like to keep an open mind, and I enjoy listening to other people's stories, and I love hearing the history. Like just doing the research for this episode, I didn't realize that there were stories about leprechauns in Roman times. I had no idea.
Yeah.
What? I mean, that had never crossed my line of learning at this point. But the more I researched and the more I looked at stuff, I thought, wow, it's everywhere. It's
Right.
everywhere.
Right.
And I think I think you're right. I think there is something to that. The fact that there's so much information about fairies and leprechauns or things like them in all of our cultures, that's got to mean something.
Yeah.
It has to.
Where there's smoke, there's fire. So yeah, and the Romans when they conquered England and stuff like that, the Druids were a big thing over there, and
Right.
they were the nature guys and running around the woods naked, and
Right.
you had the Pictish, you had the Picts who
Right.
went into battle naked and painted blue, and
Right.
so I don't know if you saw one of them naked son of a bitches running around all painted in blue, you would think he was a fairy too. I think. I mean,
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
So,
Exactly.
so yeah, I don't know.
Exactly. That's very true. Well, again, thank you, Jay, for coming on tonight and helping me do this episode. And for all of our listeners and viewers, thank you so much for spending time with us tonight. And I hope you are today, and I hope you enjoyed it. And I love your comments. I love your input, and I love hearing what you want to hear and see. I'm glad to cover whatever subject you want to talk about. So drop me a note. You can find me on Facebook under Holly's Pandorium. And you can just drop me a note and tell me what you want to talk about, or tell me what you'd like to see. I'd be happy to do another episode for you. So
press that like button and subscribe if you like this kind of stuff.
Yes, please.
Bringing it to you all the time,
Yes.
and help out the channel. So
It helps. I know it seems silly. It's a trivial thing, but it takes less than a second to click the like button.
Right, and it's just an affirmation that you like the content.
Right. And it's not just for you. It's for people that just want to hear about things like this. And I'm just one more voice in a giant gong of noise that has to do with the paranormal. But I'm out here for everybody that wants to hear and talk about it. And I would love to reach more people. So you can help me do that. So that would be great. Like and share, please. This is Holly from Holly's Pandorium saying thank you again for joining us. And we'll get back together soon with more fun stuff. Thanks again.
And this is Jay, and don't take any wooden nickels, okay? Night.